my third one, you might be interested in this. In my third one, I was told by what I call the voice like none other. Now, this was not some angelic being. A lot of near-death experiencers talk about the angels and, these wonderful people that come to them. No, this was, I call it the voice like none other. And that voice, with great thunder and with great strength, said to me, and I quote, "Test revelation. You are to do the research. One book for each death." I was not shown at all what was to be in book one or the name, but books 2 and 3 were named. Book 2 was Future Memory, and book 3 was A Manual for Developing Humans. And then and then going to that big conference that was held in Seattle, Washington. It was the early part of November 1977, and it was at the Seattle Center. My friends and my doctor felt that I needed to go up there. So I was sort of trucked in this little van all the way to Boise, Idaho. That's where I was living. Boise, Idaho, to Seattle, Washington, to the big, wonderful, the Space Needle. And underneath the Space Needle is this huge auditorium, massive auditorium. My friends took me first to my doctor. He gave me a shot and some pills, and then trucked me up to Seattle and went into this massively huge place. And the physicist from Stanford was the speaker, and his talk was The Eternal Now. And I couldn't tell you much about what he said, except at the end of his talk, he threw physics, diagrammed and said what the eternal now was and what it looked like. And he flashed up on this massive screen what the eternal now looked like. And it was exactly what I saw in my third near-death experience. And I ran out of that massive place and collapsed under sconces in the hall and just rocking back and forth and back and forth. He saw it too. He saw it too. I'm not crazy. He saw it too. He saw it too. And from that moment on, I got well. And the following year, 1978, I then quit my job and told my boss I was going to chase rainbows. What's really funny is I worked for the that part of the bank where you deal with all the fine matter that a bank has to deal with. And I went to my boss. There was this thing about, well, you might get a bank title. Back in those days, women didn't get bank titles. And so, me, a bank title? So it was a Monday morning. And I went in there and I said to my boss, I'm going to quit my job and chase rainbows. And she said, shut up, don't say another word, sit down. And that morning, now bear in mind, we're talking to a bank analyst. That morning, at 4 a.m, she had been awakened by this dream where she went to the head bank cashier and said to him that she was going to have to replace me because I was going to chase rainbows. And she woke up her husband to make sure she had evidence. And that was at 4 a.m. It was about 9:30 when I went to see her. And all I could think of to say was, that's not fair. You knew it before I did. That was so funny. But indeed, I was raped and indeed became pregnant and indeed miscarried that baby. My first death, I remember going to the bathroom. I was divorced at that time. I had 2 of my daughters still living with me. My son was living elsewhere. I had to go to the bathroom. And you could say I died on the toilet because I just started screaming and screaming and screaming and screaming. And my screams followed each other throughout the cosmos. They just lifted and went through the house, went through the roof of the house and out into the cosmos. And when I was through screaming, I could see in the toilet this little thing bobbing around, blood everywhere. And you don't become something you're not when you have a near-death experience. I was Mrs. Clean. And here was this bloody bathroom. And all I could think of was cleaning up the bathroom. Really, that's all I could think of. So that's what I did. I cleaned up the bathroom as best I could. And I just had this need to go back to bed and prop up my legs on pillow after pillow after pillow and just lay there, and hopefully, the bleeding would go away. So I did. My son was gone. My two daughters were at home yet. There was a lot of distance in age between the first daughter and the second daughter. And I remember my older daughter coming in and saying, "Do you want me to call the bank if you can't go to work this morning?" And I said, "Yes." So the two girls left. And I just was left with this conundrum. It's like, what was this? And to the best that I could, I tried to go to sleep but couldn't. And just sort of dealt with it over the weekend. And then in 2 days, it happened again. And this time it was quite severe. And it's like, what is going on here? So again, I propped up my legs and my hips with pillow after pillow after pillow. And again, went to sleep, or tried to. I'm a good sleeper, by the way. I'm a cop's kid. And my father used the bedroom outside of where I slept. We were maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles south from Twin Falls, Idaho. I was born in Twin Falls. I tell everybody, but I was born in Twin Falls, died in Boise. And so I just couldn't hear anything, see anything. I just had to go back to sleep, so I did. And the third time this happened, which now we are at March 29, when that voice spoke, before it spoke, those blobs that I had seen in the air with the first one, and they were kind of blobs, and sort of like ink blobs that were in the air. And I kept being drawn to the light. Well, in my case, then it was the light bulb or the light fixture in the bathroom. I kept bumping into the light fixture. But I'd see these blobs forming in the air, and they were kind of gray and yucky, and I didn't like them. This third time, I just had a great need or desire to call the doctor, to get out of there somehow and call a doctor. And we had these sort of long homes. And in those days, you didn't have lots of phones all over the house. I had a wall phone in the kitchen. And that's the only really phone in the house. It was a wall phone in the kitchen. So I remember wanting to get to that phone and call for help. And I couldn't walk anymore. My right thigh and my right leg, there was something coming out of my right leg. It was just coming out and coming out and coming out, and it's boiling hot. I didn't know what it was, but it was boiling hot. And had I had a knife, I'd have cut my leg off. That's how much it hurt. And I was able to tumble out of bed and sort of crawl throughout my bedroom, the hall, the living room, trying to get to that phone in the kitchen. And I didn't make it. I died again. And I remember so clearly floating out of my body and looking around and being puzzled as what was going on. And as I was puzzled, I could see my thoughts in the air. I could literally see the energy of my thoughts in the air, literally. And this time they weren't like ink blots, they were colorful. They were pretty. And I just looked at these blobs in the air and marveled at them. And then I got to thinking, those are from me. They are coming from me. They must be coming from my brain or my mind. Well, if I can create those, what else can I create? And I thought, well, I'll create a house. And by then, as I'm thinking those thoughts, the dining room of my house and where I was living and who I was and where I was disappeared. And I was like in another space. And my desire in this other space, I mean, I was convinced if I could create those blobs in the sky, in the air in my home, what else could I create? And so I decided to make a white house. And it would be 4 square. And there would be 3 big steps leading up to the porch. And it had a brass doorknob. And there it was. But it kind of hurt to make it because I hadn't used those muscles for a long, long time. Maybe ever, I don't know. But all of a sudden I was using muscles or parts of my brain or parts of my body I didn't know I had. I mean, could I do this? So I'll make this house. And by golly, when I got through making that house, it was like Merry Christmas. It's like, wow, look what I did. And then I thought, well, if I can create something inanimate, can I make something that's animate? Can I make a tree? So I decided to make a big, giant oak tree with huge roots and big leaves, big, gigantic oak tree. There it was. I did it, complete with insect holes in the bark. And I just went cuckoo nuts. I mean, it's just like, whoa, look what I can do here. And so I decided to create a heaven where loved ones that I knew that were long gone, I could see them again. And sure enough, there they were, including a grandfather that I had always wanted to meet, but he died before I could. And there he was, and he came to me. How do you describe someone who you never saw, who came to you and knew who you were? And this was my grandfather, a man I had never, ever had an occasion to meet. And here he is. And it's like, whoa. And other loved ones who had died and gone on, there they were. They were all there. And then the wonder of wonders. Jesus came. I had no desire to bow or, I just ran up to it and held him, and he held me, and we just held each other. Smiled and laughed and held each other. No great language or, we just held each other and laughed. And it was just perfect. It was just perfect. It was just perfect. And then something else happened. Jesus left. All my loved ones left. And I was there all alone in this darkness. A void. There's nothing in that void. But yet, in this total darkness, so dark you couldn't even call it black, there was the presence of all that ever was and all that ever would be. And there was a certain jiggle to it. You know, how could you use the word jiggle? I would say if you've ever made a dish with Jell-O and you're trying to get the Jell-O out of the mold, you know, and you've got this wonderful gelatin dish, and you've got your finger into it, and you're just about ready to touch that Jell-O. Oh, you're almost there. And there is a sense of wiggle. You haven't touched it yet, but there's that sense of wiggle. That's the void. That's what the void feels like. There's nothing in the void, yet everything that ever was and ever will be is in the void. Everything. It was just, wow. It's just awesome. Just being there was awesome. It was like the greatest privilege of all privileges. Because there I was in all that is, all that ever was and all that ever will be. It's all there and I'm there. And pretty soon I remember sort of floating out. I just sort of floated out of there. And back into my body. Sort of like on a carpet of little sparklers. Sort of went back into my body. And I laid there for a while with no intention of going that final maybe 3 feet to the kitchen to get the phone off the hook and call for help. Nope, I crawled all the way back to my bed, somehow got in the bed, and just laid there in a stupor. The next day, my oldest daughter said, should I call and say, you know, you can't come to work? I said, yes. And she did. And the youngest daughter went to school. And the oldest daughter went to college, I think, or wherever. And I became aware that I really needed a doctor. I couldn't tell you how I got out of bed and got dressed. I can tell you that the pain was so great in my leg, right thigh, that if I'd had a knife, I'd have knifed myself, but I didn't have a knife. And somehow I got dressed. I don't know how. Somehow I made it to my car. Again, I couldn't tell you how. Now, Boise, Idaho is like a cup. You have the bottom of the cup is where the Capitol building is and all the major buildings are and the big parks. And then going up the cup are the various layers of houses and homes going up to the very, very top. And I lived on the second layer. And how I got out of that ring and down to where the bank was, I don't know. Now, at that time, I worked in the analytical department of the bank, and at that time, they were sort of building a new bank, and they had rented this, you know, other place, and it did not have an elevator. So you walked up, and I walked up a couple of feet and then had to stop and deal with the pain, and you a few more feet and stop and deal with the pain. It took forever to get up to the top. And when I got there, fortunately for me, my boss just went by. And she screamed. And she said, "You look like you've died." She says, "I'm going to get you to a doctor." Someone was picked and chosen and took me to the doctor, took me to the hospital. And I remember, and it was a woman's doctor or something like that. It's way out State Street. And I just looked up at him, and he looked down. His nurse was there, and he said, "I can't tell why you're still alive. You should be dead." And I just looked at him and said, "Well, here I am." And he prescribed some medication that I would have to go home and stay home and take this meditation every 3 hours or 4 hours, round the clock. So I did that. Somehow I got home, and um, the things I saw all of my past lives pass by me, like on a bridge. My chest. There's this bridge, including a life. How do I say this? On another planet in another system. It's like, what? But I just let him parade by. And I remember apologizing to all of the cells in my body for having gone through what I went through. Um, I was supposed to stay there on the sofa and take this medication and watch TV. I never turned the TV on, ever. I just watched these animations, me pass through in the various lives. I had more lives as a man than a woman. I was a spunky sort, and I was a fighter. And slowly but surely, because of this medication I had to take every 3 or 4 hours, I was able to go back to work maybe a fourth of a day, then a half a day, then 3/4 of a day, then finally got up to a full day that I could work at the bank. They changed my job. So I was not doing the analysis so much, but I was now designing bank forms. And so I was working with a big drawing board, and I began to become very familiar with lines on the grafting pages I had to use on this draft board. And I remember one time I'm looking at this drafting paper. You got this big arm, and you're drawing, and the lines the lines on the page just sort of got up. They did. They just sort of came up and went over, and came up and went over. It's like lines on paper don't do that. But they came up and sort of did their own thing. And I became very aware that my brain, or my mind, my beingness had divided into all these many parts. And so part of me was doing this, and part of me was at work, and part of me was a mother, and part of me was this, that, and the other. And another part of me was sitting on that stool drawing uh, uh, bank statements. And about that time, there was the Seth books. I don't know if you know anything about the Seth books, Seth. And to read those books, and Seth, this bodiless being, and the woman writing the book, every once in a while, the lines on the page would get up and walk away or do things. And I remember looking at that and thinking, this is like the Seth books. This is like what she's talking about when she's talking about Seth. Am I another Seth? Am I like her? I don't know. And for a while, I invited people into my home, and we had Seth-like sessions. And I had, I think, maybe 3 of them. And then no, I can't do this. Can't do this anymore. How can I be a human being? How can I live in this world when I'm not a part of this world anymore? I'm different. And that I was told that I was to do the research, 1 book for each death. I was so mixed up. And I had an opportunity to fly to Chicago, Illinois, actually Oak Park, where I had an uncle that lived there. He paid my way to come and visit them. And in the O'Hare airport, I saw Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I knew who she was, and I'd seen pictures of her. And she was waiting for her plane to come in to Europe, and it was very, very late. So I walked up to her and said, hello. Could we just talk? I'd like to tell you about the time I died. And she said, oh, yeah, I'd like to hear that story. So the 2 of us sat down on a bench, just the 2 of us, visiting like a couple of little kids. And I told her all that happened to me. And she said, you had a near-death experience. Well, I'd never heard that term before. What's that? And so she told me what it was. You had a near-death experience. You are a near-death survivor. Not experiencer. She said survivor. And I really felt like I was a survivor. And we parted company after a while. Went on to see her many times later when I finally moved. But when I came back from Illinois back to Boise, the feeling was very, very strong. The vision was very, very strong that I had to leave the West and move east. And that I was to go to Falls Church, Virginia. What's a Falls Church, Virginia? I mean, to me, the United States ended at Denver. And anything east of Denver belonged in Europe somewhere. I mean, it wasn't part of the United States. Me, I'm going to Falls Church for you gotta be kidding. But that morning, and I worked in the analytical department of the bank, and I was to receive this bank title, and women don't get bank titles then. And finding out that my boss knew about this before I did. She knew about it at 4 in the morning, and I didn't until around 9. And it's like, that's not fair. She knew about it before I did. And then I sold or gave away or stored everything I had. And the children went other places. They were older. My oldest daughter got this bang-up job. My youngest daughter went to live with her father. We were divorced, and my son had another gig, if you will, that he went to. I packed up, stored, or whatever, everything I had, except my little Ford Pinto, and journeyed first to California, where I watched the sunset silver over the the Pacific, and meandered across the United States, winding up in Well, there really is a town named Falls Church, Virginia. And winding up there and going, what? Um, and here I am in Falls Church, Virginia, in the East. I'm a Westerner. I'm in the East. I might as well be in Europe. You know, this is the East. Falls Church, Virginia. There really is a town named Falls Church, Virginia, and that's where I wound up. And there was an apartment building there, and I got an apartment. And right below me was these people from Boise, Idaho, just like I was. Don't you love it? And we got to be friends. I mean, all I had in the way of furniture was what I could stuff in my little Ford Pinto. So it became very, very clear I needed a job. So I went to the job people. And Jimmy Carter, I think, was our president then. I had this job that I could go to and apply. And how do you do all this? Well, I did it all. I managed to get it to the corner of 20th and I Street. And I'm standing at the door and I'm going to go in and I'm going to apply for a job, right? And I already see myself there. I'm sitting at the desk and then I'm going in and out of the offices and I'm getting paper and I'm putting them in the filing cabinet. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I'm already there. But I'm at the doorway, but I'm already there. So pretty soon one of the bosses came and got me and brought me back, and we had our interview. And then I left. And instead of searching for a job, I went to DuPont Circle, laid down, put my purse on top of me, my hands on top of my purse, and went to sleep. I slept. I don't know how long, but I finally woke up and thought, maybe I better call this job source. And I did. And they were frantic. You got the job. You got the job. I thought, oh, that's nice. So I called the people up at the job and it said, well, I'll see you at 9 in the morning. That's it. And so I went back to where I was living. Interestingly enough, I was living with this woman, an older German, and her plane with her daughter, that was the last plane to leave Germany before the war. And she just got out. She got out on the last plane out of Germany. So here I was with this incredible older woman, and her daughter had become quite a lady, and she investigated me, and I passed all the points, and this older German lady that I lived with, and it was just fantastic living in Washington, D.C. and going back and forth and back and forth. I was able to take a bus to the station and then get on the train into town and get off at the right place to get to my job. I had been reading the book Dune by Frank Herbert. And about this planet with this special weed in it and the worms. And everything that was happening to me felt as if I were on Dune. And this train I had to take into town, it was like the worm and Dune. I'm going to going to town in this worm. And I would always say, here cometh the worm. There goeth the worm. There goes the grace of God. And I had this uh, adventure, really, of living in Washington, D.C. and working there and going back and forth on this worm. And finally, the time came when I knew I had to move. And I was told it in my own feelings and dreams I needed to move to Roanoke, Virginia. Well, what's a Roanoke, Virginia? And friends of mine, I had received mailing from them that they were teaching a class at Unity of Roanoke Valley. Well, okay, I'll go down to Roanoke Valley and I'll take their class because I love them. So I went down there, and it just felt like I needed to live there. So I made this big poster and I put a picture of me and all about me and all about me and tacked it to the wall of this Unity Church in Roanoke, Virginia. And this older couple who'd retired saw my poster and said I was to live with them. They called me up on the phone. So my son, who was in the Coast Guard by then, he and a friend of his trucked me down with all of my belongings. And in Roanoke, Virginia, I got this job. And I had to go all over everywhere teaching people how to use these new switchboards. And for some reason, I knew how to do it. So they sent me all over the United States, anywhere east of the Mississippi River. And I met people by the hundreds, by the hundreds, by the hundreds who were near-death experiences. Can you believe that? Even children. By the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I mean, I could go on, and I think we're sort of getting low on time, but just know that I started doing research on the near-death experience and the after effects of the near-death experience with adults and children. And how long was it? Maybe, see, that would have been 78 when I got there. And my husband and I married in, well, we've been married 45 years now. I met him there. And I had amassed all kinds of information about near-death experiencers. And Dr. Ken Ring found out what I was doing. How he found out what I was doing, I'll never know. He never told me. Called me up on the phone and said he had this special meeting with Raymond Moody and Bruce Grayson and all the, they're having to establish the near-death experience, IANS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. It didn't hardly exist then. And he said he was going to this meeting. He called me on the phone. He said, can I stay overnight with you guys? And this is like a Saturday and, overnight and then Sunday. So my husband and I said, sure, come on over. And we talked all night long. Nobody slept. We talked all that. And I told him what I had found about near-death experiencers. And I'd found a lot. By then, I'd done like maybe 700. A lot. And showed him this, and he says, oh my God, you know more about the near-death experience than anybody else. You got to get yourself up to Storrs, Connecticut, and meet your compadres. Compadres? What? You mean somebody else is doing this? And so I got up to Storrs, Connecticut, maybe like 3 months after the International Association of Near-Death Studies met, got together, existed. And I did a study that compared their work to my work. And went on from there. Just, I became a researcher of near-death states. Fortunately, this job I had in Roanoke took me all over, everywhere. So I'm going to say nearly 700 people by then, adults and children. It was just crazy. It was crazy. The way the people just came and came and came. I was in Washington, D.C., got this cab. The guy was blacker than I've ever seen black skin to be. And I just stared at him and I was ashamed of myself. But I mean, he really was black. And he turned around and looked at me and smiled. And he said, "You died like I did. Let me tell you all about my death." It was like that. It was just like that. It got to the point where I swear I must have been wearing a sandwich board, and on the back of the board it said, "Tell me all about your near-death experience," because just hundreds and hundreds of people. And then after that, becoming a quote unquote legitimate researcher because I had joined IANS. And now, now nearly 5,000 adults and children. And my website, everybody, www.pmhatwater.com. Get on there, get into the charts section, and you'll see all the things I found and the percentages. And then also get over to newsletter and join up because I produce a free monthly newsletter. A fun newsletter that's only for the curious. So if you consider yourself to be curious, you'll have fun with my newsletter. There's an archive, so you can go over it first and see, if you'd really like it. But my last research book coming out in May 2026, Aliens and the Near-Death Experience by Bear and Company. You can sign up now for the book. You don't have to wait. But that voice came back to me about a year and a half ago and told me to do this book about aliens. And all I could say was, "I want to do this again." But yeah, I was told to do it, so I did. That's the last of my research books. It really, really, really is the last of my research books. From now on, I can write fun books. And I've already started my first one. Fun books, not research books. But yeah, did it. And here I am.
Well, I never even got to introduce you, so but we've got your story.
You didn't have to PMH Atwater.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you think that guy in the taxi actually could read your thoughts? Because
Well, the interesting thing is I did a lot of them in Minnesota. And I'm one of these people, I'm very, very curious. So I'm in this taxi cab. I'm being driven to the job site. And I want to know all about Minneapolis. I want to know all about the colleges and the universities and the industry, and you know, I'm going down my list. And the driver got so embarrassed. He says, "Lady, I'm from Egypt." He says, I just came here to go to school. But I can tell you all about the time I died." There was one more. This firm I worked for sent me all over everywhere. And one of the places they sent me was Macon, Georgia. Bear in mind I'm from Idaho. I'm in Macon, Georgia. And so there was a truck stop nearby. So I went in there to have a little something to drink, and I was reading a paperback. And this guy came up to me. I swear he was as wide as he was tall. And he says to me, "Lady, is there anybody sitting there with you?" I, "No." "Can I sit there?" "Okay." So he does. And he puts his elbow on the table, and he looks at me really close. He says, "I want you to know I still drink and I still cuss. But I also want you to know about the time I died and what I saw." He gave me his near-death experience. I mean, what do you do? That's the way it was. You know, it's like whoever this voice was that spoke to me. I can call it God, but it's like God is not big enough. It's not a big enough of a word. Whatever it was, it was really something else.
Oh, yes. Just one last question. Do you have a message for our viewers?
I can say that love really wins. Love does win. It may not seem like it, especially what's going on with people killing each other and all over everywhere in Russia and Ukraine, and love really does win. It does.